McLaren's early season advantage in 2025 is clear, winning all but one of the 5 races which have taken place. And in their MCL39, their drivers at times have been able to showcase an astonishing turn of speed, particularly at the Australian and Bahrain Grand Prix. And housed within this MCL39, there's a unique piece of technology that was responsible for those 2 instances. Now, what did those 2 races have in common with one another, I ask you? It was, of course, the thermal management needed of the tyres during these events, playing a key part in just how competitive you would be in that Grand Prix. And we'll touch back on this a little later in the video. Now, let's turn our attention back to what this clever piece of tech on the MCL39 could be. What is it exactly? Now, I'm talking about the McLaren's brake systems on their MCL39, as up until this weekend just gone in Bahrain, we really hadn't gotten a look at just how intricate they truly were. And the advancements in this area of their cars since the start of this ground effect era is remarkable. A side-by-side comparison between 2022 and this season's McLaren's, and we can even go further than that and showcase other cars' brake systems for this season, and it's the same situation where their closest rivals fail in comparison to the complexity that we are seeing on this year's McLaren. And of course, the $1 million question here is, how does this enable McLaren to have such superior thermal management over their tyres against the rest of the field? Now, we have to quickly break down the makeup of the front brake systems on the current generation of Formula 1 cars, because they're quite interesting. So firstly, you have all of the brake components that comprise the braking systems on these cars, and these are like the brake calipers, the brake discs, the brake pads, and so on and so forth. Now, all 3 of these parts are combined to make the system we have. Now, all 3 of these parts have their own uniquely tailored coverings which they are placed within, and then finally you have the last piece of the puzzle, which is of course the brake drum. This is the huge piece of carbon fibre that the Pirelli wheels are placed on top of before a team heads out onto the racetrack. So first and foremost, I want to explain now this particular area which I've put a red box in. This is very much exposed even with the tyre on, and they're taking the cool air and directing this directly into and through the caliper, very much cooling it, because at times it can reach up to 200 degrees centigrade. So an extremely warm piece of the overall brake, but not the warmest. And of course, this is completely being housed off, which I've also highlighted in yellow. It is completely separate from all of the other points of what makes up and comprises the overall brake system. Now, I also believe there are other areas that this air is also being directed towards. Now, as you can see, there's a red arrow now on the screen, and these are other areas the airflow will be coming out of. Now, essentially, what I believe it's going to completely go on top of what is known as the kind of middle ground of the overall carbon fiber casing, which is on top of the actual brake system itself, but thus protecting it, and of course is an additional layer of heat resistance to make sure the tires are not overheating as well. And this is something that's happened up and down the grid. But then with these new areas of airflow being able to come in between the picture on screen right now and the actual cake tin which is on top of this whole system, there is also now an extra layer of where this air is going in, and this will quite naturally create a cold vacuum of air in between these 2 areas, thus making the overall heat dissipate in the actual brake system, meaning that the tires will not be overheating to as a dramatic degree from which they generally would. And this is where I think the McLaren brake system really comes into its own, because no other team has such intricate ducting like this. They haven't specifically targeted and housed and measured how much cool air and how much lower the temperature can be within their brake system as a result of this. And it's quite obvious McLaren have spent a lot of time and effort in making sure that the temperature that goes into these brakes is of course the right amount, and the air that is in there is going to cool it to the correct degree that they want it to be, because too much cold air into this area is going to have a negative impact on the race distance, and too little also would have the same effect. And that's why there is such a drastic difference between race pace and qualifying pace, because as we saw in Bahrain this past weekend, Russell was able to get within under 0.2 of a second of Oscar Piastri. And of course, over a race distance on two different instances, one before the safety car and one after the safety car, the amount of seconds Piastri was able to get kind of ahead of Russell is indicative of the overall abilities that McLaren car has when it comes to keeping the thermal management of their tyres within the realms of which they want them to be in. And you could see that not only in Bahrain this weekend, but also the opening round in Australia, when we had a damp but drying track in Melbourne. We saw the McLaren car of both Norris and Piastri going a second a lap quicker than literally the entire field. And this is all down to the fact that they have this very clever and unique system on the MCL38 that allows them to keep the tyre temps to the levels that they wish them to be at. And I fully expect this trend to continue. I think as we get to tracks further into the calendar and the teams kind of concertina in terms of the overall pace, I think we will see teams be able to get the better of McLaren in qualifying, but the race pace situation will completely reverse that and still have a major advantage for McLaren, because I don't think anybody is going to spend any amount of time designing such an intricate new front brake system for their cars just for like the remaining 20 odd races we have this year. It's just not a good use of your time and resources with 26 just on the horizon next year. So I expect to see McLaren completely dominate the season, at least in race pace terms. Qualifying, not so much. But it's going to be a season where I would not be surprised to see Oscar Piastri turn up and become drivers' champion at the end of the season, with McLaren retaining their constructors' crown. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap the video up here. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, do of course leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you're new as well, and join us here on F1 Unraveled. Alright everyone, I will catch you all later on tomorrow or Wednesday with a new F1 video. Catch you all then.